Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're following the money. We're going to look at those hit TV shows made right here in New Zealand and figure out where the profits actually end up when global media companies are involved. It's a pretty fascinating journey.
So let's just get right into it with a huge question. We all love settling in to watch a great Kiwi show, right? And a lot of the time, our own tax dollars are helping to get these things made. But have you ever stopped to think about where the profits from these huge hits actually go?
Okay, so the big issue we're talking about today has a name: capital leakage. And what's wild is that it's a totally legal way for profits made right here in New Zealand to be, well, shifted overseas to parent companies, say, in the UK. And the result? It shrinks the amount of profit that can actually be taxed here at home.
All right, so how on earth does this actually happen? How does the money make this great escape offshore? Let's break down the main way it's done.
The secret sauce, if you will, is something called transfer pricing. Now, don't let the name scare you. It's basically just an accounting method where different parts of the very same company trade with each other. It sounds a bit complicated, but it is absolutely key to understanding how these big multinational companies can legally shuffle their profits from one country to another.
So let's talk about escape route number one. This one's actually pretty simple, and it's all about something called management fees. Imagine this. The New Zealand company makes a hit show and earns a bunch of revenue. Awesome, right? But then its parent company over in the UK turns around and charges it a massive management fee. Suddenly, the profit here in New Zealand looks a whole lot smaller on paper. And what does that mean? Yep, less corporate tax gets paid here at home.
And here's a super simple way to think about it. Let's say the Kiwi company earns $100, but then it has to pay its UK parent a $90 fee. Well, now New Zealand's tax department can only tax what's left, just $10. You can see how a huge slice of that money gets moved out of the country before it even has a chance to be taxed.
Okay, on to escape route number two. This one has to do with all those huge international shows we can't get enough of. Like The Traders. When a New Zealand company wants to make a local version, they have to pay a royalty or a licensing fee to whoever owns the rights overseas, in this case, ITV Studios in the UK. That fee gets written off as a business cost here in NZ. And just like that, more capital is drained away from our local industry.
So really, it all comes down to this basic formula. You start with the total revenue a show makes, but the really important part is what you subtract from it. You take away the local production costs, of course, but then you also subtract those big offshore management fees and IP royalties. So the bigger those offshore fees get, the smaller the taxable profit is that stays here in New Zealand. Simple as that.
And this is where things get, well, a little paradoxical, especially when you realize that our own public money is part of the equation. So here's the kicker. We, through funders like NZ On Air, put public money into these local production companies to make great Kiwi content. But because these companies are owned by massive overseas corporations, their number one financial priority often isn't New Zealand. It's the parent company. So you end up in this really weird spot where our tax dollars are helping to generate profits that just leave the country.
And if you want a perfect, real-world example of this paradox in action, look no further than this case from 2013. It involves a very well-known production company, South Pacific Pictures. Just check out these numbers.
Okay, first up, have a look at what they declared as profit here in New Zealand for that year. It was about $3.02 million. Okay, got that number in your head? Now, get this. In that exact same year, they paid a dividend to their parent company in the UK of $4.5 million. That is almost $1.5 million more than the entire profit they declared in New Zealand. It's just a jaw-dropping and, again, perfectly legal example of how this all works. So you're probably wondering, well, what's being done about all this? How do we make sure companies are paying their fair share? Let's take a look at the IRD's playbook. Right, so New Zealand's Inland Revenue Department, the IRD, is basically the referee in this game. It's their job to look closely at these kinds of practices to stop what's called tax-based erosion. And thankfully, they do have a few tools in their toolbox to fight back. They really zero in on three key things when they're challenging these big international money moves. Something called the arm's length principle, a 25% rule for royalties, and making sure we properly value what's called local intangibles. Okay, that first one, the arm's length principle, is really just about common sense and fairness.
It says that when a company deals with its own parent company, the prices have to be the same as if they were dealing with a total stranger on the open market. It's designed to stop them from charging themselves crazy high artificial fees just to move money around.
And for royalties, the IRD has this really neat little rule of thumb, which this chart shows perfectly. It's called the 25% rule. Basically, if the royalty fees being sent offshore start to creep up past 25% of the company's earnings into that red zone you see, that's a huge red flag for the IRD, and they're going to start asking some tough questions.
And finally, this is a big one. The IRD really pushes back against the idea that all the value is in the overseas brand or the show's recipe. They argue, and you can see it broken down here, that a huge amount of value is created right here in Aotearoa. You've got our local R&D, the connection with Kiwi audiences, and most importantly, the incredible skills of our local crews. And the IRD's point is, that value needs to be counted and it needs to be taxed right here in New Zealand. Which, really brings us to the fundamental question at the heart of all of this.
So after all that, what this whole explainer really comes down to is this one massive question for all of us. When a global smash hit is made with our talent, our crews, and even our taxpayer money, how do we actually measure the true value of what's created right here in New Zealand? And maybe more importantly, how do we make sure that value stays here? It's a tough one, right? A real balancing act between global business and local benefit.